Welcome back to another episode of Nydal. I'm really excited about this one because it's a project that I've been wanting to work on for quite some time. I couldn't, get the right assets and the right ideas to put it together until now. So I'm really excited to share this with you. Also, this is something that's been requested by many of you for quite some time. We're going to be working on a beachfront site. And just right next to it, I'm going to be also working on a sports complex. But before I forget, what you see on the screen right now is the result of a 2-hour live stream I did about a week ago. So in case you haven't seen it, the link is included in the general playlist. I've been naming those live streams whenever I do live streams in between episodes. Whatever the last number of the episode is, I just do like 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, and so on. So some of the earlier live streams have like a much more weirder numbering scheme, like 0.5, 0.51. I mean, whatever. The actual playlist is in order, so just go by that, and you won't miss a thing. For the most part, it was just expanding suburbs, in case you were wondering. And we just talked about the future Nydal, as well as other things and mods and, just usually what happens on a live stream. So in case you're not following me on Twitch, you probably want to do so if you're interested in getting a bit more of an in-depth view of Nydal. All right, so what am I doing here? Yes, so I'm starting with this sports complex, and I've been doing some research. And whenever I say I'm doing research, it sounds way more scientific than what I actually did. But mostly it was me looking at Google Maps imagery. And one of the things that I found in common from these like sport complexes, especially the ones I was trying to look for, specifically ones by the water. I don't know if that makes any different, but because that's what I'm working on right now, I figured that might be a more accurate representation of what I wanted to build. For the most part, they all feature the same sort of combination of fast and slow, like tennis courts. I don't know exactly what will be the translation in English. Like, is it like brick dust for the slow ones, the red orangey one, as opposed to the cement one, which will be the fast one, and that's on the other side. I think that's correct. Someone will for sure tell me in the comments down below. But I was struggling there for a second, trying to look for a sort of a clubhouse building, and I was just browsing mostly the vanilla assets that I have. Eventually, I settled on this one, which is sort of a corner building that I ended up duplicating 3 times, so that it would just have like a horseshoe sort of shape pointing towards the inside of the sports facility. I thought it was pretty nice, but now I had to like combine it with a whole bunch of props. In this case, I'm using a bit of a surface. What is it? Pulpable pavement. I think it's what it's called. A pulpable asphalt, actually. Oh, this is like the old school one. Yeah, I remember now. And in a minute, you're gonna see me add some ivies and some like tables and things like that, just to make it look a bit nicer. We're still, this episode I'm going crazy with props, even though we're still, pretty much within the limits. For those of you who don't know, the game allows you to use up to 65,000 props. There's ways to circumvent that limitation, and for the time being, we really don't have to. This was a much bigger problem in previous projects of mine. Now, because we have network fences for the most part, that gives us a ton of wiggle room, because before you literally had to place one single prop after the other to build a giant fence, and obviously that made it really difficult to add any other kind of detail in the rest of your city, mainly because you were using all your props just for fences. Now, because we have network fences, as you are going to see me add in just a second, there we go, it just makes our life a little bit easier, but you can still go a little bit crazy adding props and hitting that limit. I think so far we're around the 7,000 mark at the end of this episode. I honestly haven't checked, but based on what I remember from previous ones, I think that seems about right. And for the most part, I try to add the details with the trees, because trees have a much higher limit. Props are usually just objects. And then there's another sort of, I mean, there's limits for everything that you do in this game, for network segments, for nodes, and things of that nature. But in terms of props, which is, you know, usually what we use to detail these projects, well, that's sort of the limit. Trees have a much higher number, and I'm trying to do, or at least have the trees do most of the heavy lifting, as well as the actual road segments themselves for the most part. I'm trying to be very frugal with the placement of things, even though if that costs a little bit of detail at the end, I think it's still worth sometimes, you know, cutting down on prop usage, especially because not everything that you see in the city will actually be seen at a closer level. You know, I'm trying to be very sneaky with my camera placement. Not that I'm hiding anything, but I know there's areas of the city that will never be on camera just because there's no point. So I, you know, try to avoid detailing everything just for my sanity for the most part. Over here, I'm just combining a whole bunch of different vines. As you can see, these are all props. These are even though they're vegetation, they're not trees, unfortunately. And because this is a sports club, we're adding a few chess tables, which is an asset that I haven't used before. Obviously combining that with umbrellas so that you don't die under the sun when you're playing a game of chess. And because I've duplicated these buildings 3 times, we get 3 times the props in the middle. So we had those tiny little fountains there that didn't look super realistic. So I just cover them with 1 giant or 3 pot plants basically. And back here, I figured this will be a nice setting for some tables so that people can have lunch looking at the water's edge. That's basically adjacent to the thing. By the way, you probably noticed that this is a slightly longer episode than usual. Just I've been getting a lot of comments from many of you that wanted to see a bit more longer content. So this is not going to be the norm from now on. It's just this one episode. I wanted to, I guess, share a few more extra details in this one. So hopefully you'll enjoy. You better watch the whole thing. That way we don't upset the audience retention algorithms. Thank you very much. Another thing that I wanted to add here, just quickly switching back to what I'm doing, is I wanted to have like smaller bits of vegetation in between the different rows of these tennis courts. I'm using the park life paths to sort of create these pedestrian inner streets in between all this different, all the different tennis courts, like I said. And over here, we're starting to add our first football field or soccer pitch or whatever you want to call it, depending on where you live in the world. And there is some grass. Actually, I've been sort of encountering this sort of issue, which it seems to be like a new thing. I've never noticed that before. I mean, I have noticed it for like a month or 2 now, but it wasn't a thing before, where you would place something down and the surface around it will be kind of like glitchy. So you can see like patches of grass sort of growing underneath the soccer field. But obviously I'll fix that in a moment using a surface painter. Don't worry about that. But I don't know, it's just weird. We actually found this sort of bug on the last live stream, where moving buildings would cause the surface behind it, the surface below it is a better way to put it, to not update unless you hold the shift. So thankfully Cuboid was in the chat, so he saw the bug, and I think he's working on it. Hopefully he is. It's not a huge deal. It's just like an annoying thing, especially when you move things around and then like maybe the props are missing or what have you, just doesn't quite look right. But if you hold shift and like nudge it a little bit, everything sort of clicks in place and it looks good. You probably noticed that throughout this time lapse as well. And yeah, I think we're finally moving on to the beach side. So a couple things about this. I wanted to work on this peninsula. It will actually serve 2 purposes. The one side of this area, the one facing towards the marina, will actually be the beach side, which is what I'm working on right now. I wanted to add some restaurants some like food carts of sorts, I guess, if you can call those food carts. They're more like food containers. And then in that central block that it's currently empty, I'm going to be putting down some restaurants, mostly like tourist trap sort of restaurant things. Like, think of this as like, I don't know if you ever been to like San Francisco, like Pier 39, like that kind of area. I'm sure you imagine what I'm talking about. I mean, this is like super common on basically every city that I've been to that's sitting on the water. They have some like restaurants that are mostly for tourists, like very colorful. And another thing that I wanted to do, and this is something that I wanted to start working on in other places of the city, is started working, well, I keep saying this word, start working. I just want to start putting down a bus network. And because we're on sort of the end here of this peninsula, and we also are going to have some docks. I mean, you can see some cargo docks, so some cargo boats sort of coming in. And at some point, I'm going to add another passenger ferry, which I'll talk about it in greater detail in just a minute. But I expect a lot of traffic to be in this area, so I figured, why don't we do like a proper sort of mini bus terminal, so that we can have a couple of lines coming from different parts of the city merging here and picking up passengers and, well, distributing across the city. I want to do a similar treatment next to the central station, especially on that giant parking lot that I put together right next to it. And I've been getting a lot of comments on how unrealistic that is. I'm still going to leave a big chunk of that as a parking lot, but I might repurpose part of that area as a sort of a bus terminal with a couple of these like entrances so that multiple buses can be loading passengers at the same time. And I might even start working on that in the next episode, just setting up some bus lines, because I think that's going to improve traffic significantly. Right now, as I was recording this, there was a massive conga line that was blocking the traffic from Nydal, like the actual downtown area of the city, all the way to the edge of the map. That's how long the line of cars was. So, I mean, reason for that, I don't know. When I put down this dock over here a couple episodes ago, it sort of helped significantly, because now trucks didn't need to drive from the edge of the map to here. They would just simply unload the truck on this dock over here and just go straight into the city from the opposite direction. I don't know if this is making any sense as I'm working on these concrete lines, but the point is that I wanted to have multiple points of entry. Right now, because we only have the trains and the road, like that's sort of the shortest path from the edge of the map to the main city. That's why we're having this massive, bumper to bumper traffic, which is not great. It kind of halts the city a little bit, and it's not something that I wanted to keep like that forever. So at the end of this episode, I would have added multiple docks that are kind of hidden, away from like the scenes that I'm showing you, like in the cinematics. Eventually, we're going to work on those and design them, but for now, I just wanted to put those together. The problem with the passenger ferries primarily is that they spawn like crazy. There's no way to control them. So they spawn like one after the other, and then you end up having this giant conga line of ships that are not even full. They have maybe like one has like 4 passengers, and the next one has like 400. And then there's another one after with 1 passenger, and so on. So apparently, as far as I can tell, there's no mods that can help with that. And I think there's a solution that I was trying to like sort of, I don't know, not really a solution, but kind of a hack to see if I can get that to at least look reasonably realistic, which is to maybe hide these docks like away from the city, like behind a mountain or whatever, and do like a little transfer sort of station where people get off that boat and get on a ferry boat, which I can control with much level of detail. So I can have exactly the number of ships that I want at the exact capacity that I want, and those will be the ones visible in the city. So that's something that I might play with in the future. In fact, I might even stream that so that I can get some of your input while I do it, and maybe we can come up with a better solution. But right now, and at the cinematics at the end, you'll see that we're gonna have a million giant fairies spawning one after the other, and they sort of clip with one another too, which is not very pretty. It's just, yeah, it's not great. Okay, in any case, this is me putting down all these very colorful restaurants. I ended up sort of tweaking the colors of some of these buildings. Most of them are vanilla, by the way, which look great, honestly, if used in the right amount and combination, and if you change their colors enough. So for example, here I'm sort of making one of them a little bit more on the grayish side of things. I'm putting down this like Penny's restaurant as well, in this case facing the opposite side of the water, because we're gonna have a few more buildings in this. I mean, you have waterfronts on both sides, so no matter where you're sitting or which restaurant you pick, you're gonna be looking at the water. Which is ultimately what you want from a place like this, I guess. In the gaps that we have empty, I'm just filling everything with flowers and bushes and all kinds of vegetation combinations. I wanted this place to look like very like just feel like very cozy at the same time, and because not only this is a tourist attraction, but at the same time is where people get off from their cruises. So it needed to be a place where it's a kind of a transit heavy spot, but at the same time, it's also a place where you can just hang out. So it serves both purposes. And most likely we're gonna have a few of these type of areas in the city. In fact, this specific area might even grow a little bit bigger. I obviously didn't have time to like finish this completely because it's an ever evolving project. I might come back later and just add an extra block of restaurants. In the meantime, I'm just adding this one right here. Also, by the way, we needed to add the every tourist trap needs one of these. So now there's a giant Nydal sign on top of this building that people can Instagram the crap out of. That's sort of the inspiration for this. I was looking for like a giant heart like prop, couldn't find one, but at least this one I think is like iconic enough that people will probably take photos of it. And because I never do this, here's another look at what Nydal looks at night. I rarely play the game at night. I don't think it's very attractive. You really can't see much of a detail, but I know many of you enjoy it. So there you go. You get to see a little bit of nightlight action, specifically on this neighborhood. Because these buildings were a little bit plain too, I decided to add a few more billboards, add some like visual pollution of some kind. Those signs ended up looking pretty good, so I'm not too unhappy with how they look. They just had a pop of color that I think was necessary for a neighborhood like this. Over here, this is something that we're going to be working on in a future episode, but I wanted to sort of lay down the road that will lead into that other like little island in front of the peninsula that may have. I'm not entirely sure what I'm gonna put there. I'm sure there's gonna be a lot of comments with suggestions. I have a few ideas, but I'm not like certain or settled on a specific design. Another thing that I did there, I don't know if you noticed, is I extended the tram line so that at least we get trams going across the bridge, which wasn't a thing before. And finally, we're starting to work on the beach itself. So what I'm doing here, I'm struggling trying to get these like wooden pedestrian paths to go into the water, but they come with that light in the middle, which I don't think you want to have lights near the water. Unfortunately, there's no way to like remove it. I guess I could have put like covered it with a tree or some kind of bush that's tall enough that would just block the, like, at least, you know, not have that lamp there be so close to the water. It's obviously I didn't do it. This is as how it's going to look like in the end, but I might come up with something that's more realistic. Yeah, because water and electricity probably don't go very well together. Well, probably not. They definitely don't go well very well together. But you get my point. It's just one of those things that because I no longer have network skins, I can't control, and I think it yeah, it needs some kind of visual solution that I yet have to apply. I'm also copying and pasting some of the rocks that we applied to that to the restaurant, like not restaurant, to the grocery store a couple episodes ago. And you're probably noticing that the actual beach itself, it's a little bit on the rocky side, which you would expect in a place like this. But I wanted this to be more of an actual like proper beach. So I ended up using Surface Painter. There's one of the textures from this map theme has like a much finer sand. So I ended up just covering it with that. And I'm using those sea foam animations by Ronix that look, it's the first time I use them. They look fantastic. Just to add a bit more movement on the water. Obviously, I think it's meant more for like open waters as opposed to this like side river, even though it's like very close to the ocean. In any case, we're approaching the end of the episode. The before and after is coming in just a few seconds here, but I do want to remind you that you can follow me on Twitter, twitter.com/StreetToaster. I'm actually pretty active there. I tweet almost every day, and I've been posting a lot of screenshots from Nydal as well as other projects. And I have open DMs, so if in case you want to get in touch with me, that's one way to do it. If you enjoyed this episode, however, please consider giving this video a like. That's very much appreciated. If you're new to the channel and just randomly landed on this one, if you like what you see, you might want to consider subscribing as well. That way you're notified next time I post one of these videos. But that's all I have for you today. Thank you for watching and hope to see you in the next one.